think when it comes to a relationship with our children, am I being the dad I wanted as a kid, or am I being the father my children need?
What is up, everybody? Ed Gough Jr. of the Dad Central Show and Dad Central, and the man who doesn't like surprises.
That would be me, Drew Soleyn of Dad Central and the Dad Central Show.
Well, first...
Hold on. Let me just say this. It's not that I don't like surprises.
Oh.
The surprises can be wonderful. It's that when I can know something in advance to prevent myself from maybe doing something I shouldn't do, or stepping on toes, or being ill-prepared, I prefer not to have that happen.
Well, sorry this time. We just had to roll it without you, man. It's all good. You passed the test again. No worries. I was gonna say first show of the third season. That's what I was gonna say.
Well, technically, it's not the first show of the third season. It is our first recording after we've launched our third season.
Our first conversation with someone.
Yes, sir. Excited to bring the new season to everyone. And as we said in our previous show, breaking that cycle of fatherlessness is really, a main theme and a main idea. And so we want to see dads equipped and empowered to do that.
Yeah, well, I am excited for another third season, technically first new conversation with somebody else, but our second recording of the new season. I'm really looking forward to it. And we have more and more supporters and great people when it comes to fatherhood for our upcoming season. But right now, when we're recording this, we're in a deep freeze. And the new friend we have on today was going to blame Canada for cold weather, but when we find out where they're from, we're going to blame them. So, Drew, what's going on in your world?
Not sounding so friendly. No, I'm just kidding. What's going on in my world? Because we have the deep freeze, the rink is done, and the ice is almost ready in the backyard.
You see, people, before we started recording, Drew, I don't know what we're going to talk about. See, I find ways. The rink is done. Have you been playing some hot skating on it in the whole bit?
No, a little bit too busy, too much stuff going on. And the just because of the way the weather's been, it's not actually like it's good now. If I do one more flood, I think it'll be like nice, really nice. But no, it's good. And it's something that we'll probably get on either tonight or maybe over not towards the weekend because we're traveling, but soon.
What is this the first time you've done a rink?
No, done it at least five winters. So
wow. So for those fathers, dads, male caregivers, or just parents, what are some tips that you can give them when it comes to building an ice rink?
Me?
Yes. Tips? Well, you've done 5.
Oh, you're asking me. Yes, I thought you were saying I needed the tips.
No. You've done
to help my rink not be so. So the tip is, watch a bunch of YouTube videos because that's pretty much how I learned it, and then. Just start small and start simple. And once you have done that, then build from there. Because at the end of the day, it's really about the experience that you and the family has on the rink. Because you can easily get focused on making it perfect or, building something fancy and really lose hours and hours and hours out there. But for me, the goal is what can I create in terms of memories and experiences with our family as a result of having the rink? So
there you go. Well, before we get to our new warm friend, the Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man, and because when men care for themselves and others, there is a positive impact. So, Drew, I will give you the honor and privilege of introducing our new warm friend.
Great. Thank you, Ed. And we're excited to talk to Steve Anderson today. So Steve is married and has 2 sons. He's the former director of the not-for-profit Boys to Men Mentoring Network of, where he's from, Minnesota, where he led national and international transformational weekends for boys. So Steve's got over 10 years of experience working with men and boys and developing the emotional awareness and skills they need to reach their full potential. So he lived through his dad's spectacular burnout. as a teenager and works with fathers to help them avoid doing the same in their own lives. So, Steve's a certified professional coach with training in applied neuroscience. So, Steve, welcome to the show. We're excited to have you, and thanks so much for being on with us today.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on the first conversation, right, of season 3. And to all the Canadians out there, I would say I have nothing but love for Canadians, but living in Minnesota, when I see the weather in Knife Head or some town, it's like 40 below. I'm like, we know that weather's coming. So nothing personal, just
Yeah, yeah.
geographic.
We can just pull you off the screen anytime we want to. You know that. All right. But no, real pleasure to have you here. Looking forward to getting some really good sharing from you, personal experience and lived experience in regards to dads, fatherhood, etc. So I will let Drew kick it off.
Well, Steve, we like to dig into a little bit of the backstory of our guests. And so, can you start by just telling us maybe what was life like for you growing up?
Um, well, I thought at the time normal, right? Like I think most of us do, whatever we're experiencing is the normal thing. But I'll just give one incident, which is the big one, and it was mentioned. My dad was not somebody who could express himself, right? So he had a very stressful job. He ran a rehab clinic, and he would come home tense, right? So my relationship with my dad was like, hey, he'd come home, disappear into his office, right? Because that was the way his way of dealing with emotions was sort of get himself away. And it wasn't working because then he had a nervous breakdown. And I think this happens with a lot of people, which I learned as an adult, right? I don't remember a lot about it. Right? I mean, I know he was, put in a facility for 30 days, right, where he was, locked doors, y so he doesn't kill himself, and, he went from running a rehab center to, after that, it was his first job was, being a waiter at a Happy Chef, which, 30 miles from town, and I think that 30 miles from town too was probably a bit of a shame thing of, if you think about the fall from, I'm the director in this small town and now it was broken. And so that was, and that's on my dad's side and super sure my mom was bipolar and not treated well for the longest time, right? And so until those medications got right, uh, you know, a super high event once a year, right? Super low event at least once a year. And so I did not have a lot of good okay, I did not have role models for positive emotional expression and regulation. It was avoidance or eat food was the kind of two options. And I took that and my coping mechanisms though, because I didn't want other people to know what was going on. And it was funny, my brother took a different path. He's older than me, right? And so he did he got in fights with them and there'd be shouting matches and he had that kind of relationship. I was the youngest and I thought I could fix things, right? So delusional, but I thought I could and if I'd be good. So I got good grades, right? I was a good Dairy Queen employee. I mean, any of those public facing things, I made sure I did really well. And then everybody would think, oh, look how successful he's being. Everything must be fine at home. So that works. I mean, as far as like I always had a job, I did well in school, I could get, employment, and it was terrible for relationships because who and it took me a while to realize that, right? But I was not saying what I really felt. So it's like, who are you even dating? Who are you being with? And so in my 30s, that's when I started going, this is just not working. And that's where I began doing the emotional work, right? Which led me to working with boys, and that. And one of the things that I've been saying lately too is for men out there, volunteering, and because all so much of what of the work I did was volunteering in the beginning, is um and working with children, there's a healing aspect of that, right? Was I'm working with these boys, I'm being the adult that I wish I had in my life with a teen, right? When I was mentoring and I didn't know it going into it, right? I thought, well, this just seems good and I should do it. But what I got out of it was huge. So And that's something I didn't realize, right? And when I was the director of Boys to Men, and sometimes I'd be talking to somebody to see if they wanted to, who was interested, and I would ask them, "What do you hope to get out of this?" Right? Because I would want people to come in thinking, yes, they're going to give, but what's that? Because if you're just giving, right, and giving, 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 and not getting anything, eventually you're going to be empty. The tank's going to be there, and so to have that awareness, I think can be really valuable. And yeah, I think that's uh, super short, but it'll give you an idea of growing up, what it was like, right? Not expressive. I had to go through my own work to do it. And now I've got, when I met Katie, who's my wife, uh, about 10 years ago, her boys were 6 and 10. Um, and we got married. Their biological father died, so I've been able to adopt them. And now they're 16 and 20. So um, and I could not be happier as being a dad. That what I mean, I was looking for that thing, right? What is it to be a man, right? Join the army, trained in martial arts, and it's like, no, cool. I always like, and I never went into combat, but I will always like blowing stuff up. I have no, I think that's cool. It's fun. And yep, I'm 50 and I would still, if I had a chance, blow things up. Um, but it wasn't that fulfilling. It had the purpose, but not that spot, right? And whereas being a dad, it's like, okay, right? This is when I do this right, when I have the good dad days, it's like nothing compares with that for me.
Hmm. Awesome. Well, thank you for, sharing some of those things. Not easy. One of the things you said that really stood out to me is you said it wasn't, it was good for, basically put on a good show, my words, not yours, but it was terrible for relationships. And then you said something like, I was doing that for a while until it wasn't working. Can you talk more about like the what wasn't working? Like what were you experiencing? What were you seeing? And how did you know that it wasn't working?
Um, I was in a long-term unhealthy relationship, right? Uh we both had rough growing up, and I would say hers was much rougher than me because she'd multiple different types of abuse. And so there was a part, we had that loving caring part, and we both had our wounds, and neither of us, we couldn't work past the wounds. And so we both weren't happy, but we stayed in this thing, and stayed in this thing. And it's like I like trying to figure out, why am I can't keep doing this, and so I mean, um and I think that, to me, that was the tipping point where I actually had to start doing work, on far as, figuring out, why am I unable to express myself, right? Why am I just, I was lousy at boundaries. And so for me, that was the biggest thing, because I what if we say yes to everything, right? I think our yeses are meaningless, right? And so my yeses were meaningless. And so I had to get to a spot where I could set boundaries and say no. And then that was, um, and then once I did that, I still stayed in the relationship for a couple years as I kept working through this. And then um, kept working, and finally that relationship ended, and I took time off for a while, and then I met Katie, who had gone through her own struggles because her husband had dealt with alcoholism, not at first when they got married, right? And so both of us came from really difficult relationships. And so um in a sense, we knew the warning signs, and could appreciate um each other's experience, and that we're both, um we need to have certain conversations on things. And just I was like, oh, for the first time in my life, and this is why I was such a lousy boyfriend and partner before, like, for the first time in my life, and it scared the hell out of me, I could, go to Katie and tell her something I was afraid to share, right? And really be vulnerable about something that was important to me. And I'd have my heart would be pounding. I would feel uncomfortable for at least an hour or 2 afterwards just because how unsettling it was because I hadn't done it, and then, she wouldn't go off and she would hear me, and I'm like going, "Oh my god, so this is what a healthy relationship is, and I can do the same for her." And so it only took me 40 some years to get to that spot, but, we're here and it's still work. I still meet with a group of men every 2 weeks, who are about, talking about what's going on and what's important to us, so I think it's like, life always gives us new challenges, so we're never done learning about ourselves and our skills and what we need, right?
Mm.
And as I'm doing that, it's like, "Oh, man, I can have my bad days and go, cool. I'm either gonna talk to my wife or I'm gonna talk to the guys on Monday night." And I almost always get some decent clarity when I can, when I've got that person, either my wife or these men who I can talk to and say, "This is what I'm struggling with."
Yeah. Well, thanks for going into that part as well. And the reason I ask is because I think that there are many dads, many men who can very much relate to that process. We had Dr. John Olaf. He's the at University of British Columbia. He's the Canada Research Chair for Men's Health, and he has been doing a study on men building better relationships. And so, what you described was very much what he found in the research. Like men will typically stay in an unhealthy relationship, not wanting to rock the boat, not wanting to make any waves, not wanting to, and not even necessarily being willing to do the work. It's only, and your case is a little bit different from the research in that you were in the relationship and you started to say it's not working, and I need to try and figure out why, and I need to take some steps to move into a better, healthier place. Whereas most men, it's not until the relationship ends in some way, shape, or form that they then will start to do more of that work, and then they're much more motivated to do it. So, you know, clearly something was going on for you that you said, I wanted to move in that direction, and you were able to. You had the strength and the support and resources to do that. But I think it's common. I think many men have experienced it, and that's why I thought it'd be valuable for you to share. Like, what was that moment for you that gave you the realization things aren't working, they're not going well, and then how you've been able. So maybe you can, Ed, I'll let you hop in after this if you want, but maybe you can talk about the steps that you began to take that moved you towards and then ultimately getting in your new relationship, which seems to have worked out quite well.
Yes, well, so the first step was reaching out, and I actually, I I looked for a men's group somewhere, and I think one of the closest things I found, there was a church that had a men's group, and so I'm like, "Okay, maybe," so I went to it, and I sat through it, and there wasn't any, it was like, okay, but it's more a casual conversation, which I can totally see the value of, but it was not what I was looking for. And at the end of it, this guy walks up to me and says, "Hey, like, I think it looks like you're looking for something more, a little bit deeper." And then he mentioned the Mankind Project. And so I went online and I looked up the thing and like, okay, they got a weekend and it looked really good. And they had one in Minnesota in like October. This must have been like March, April, or spring or something. I'm like, I can't wait. I saw one in Arizona in August. And so you know, flew down, did the weekend, and really, I think the simplest thing is I actually touched one of the bigger wounds that I was carrying around. And this was connected to my mother, which, sort of like, right, our opposite sex relationships have huge impacts on, right? I mean, if that's the way that we're, you know, interested sexually, right? If you're, so not having that dealt with was me, I realized, right? Always thinking my value wasn't helping, right? If I'm helping, I'm lovable. But if I'm not helping, I'm not lovable. So that set me up to just always be giving, giving. And uh, so I did that weekend. And that was where, after the weekend, started going to a group, just a men's circle. There's the same guys. And that every 2 weeks. And we started practicing things like, um, some of this, right, is simple, but a lot of us men are lousy as it, right? Just identifying the feeling. what are you feeling? Because you say you're angry, but it looks like you're about to cry. I mean, it's like, oh, so that's what you call sadness or grief kind of deal. So from the basics to um, getting better at identifying what we're feeling, looking, you know, one of the things that I really liked about it was, um, I was asked the question, when's the first time you felt that? And it just is a way to think of so much. Sometimes I think what we do is a lot of stuff. I was still a kid and I was responding as a kid. And it makes sense for 13-year-old Steve to respond this way, right? But man, Steve, that response doesn't seem right, right? So what would getting practice in looking at, just am I answering this from a place of fear and wanting to be loved, which there's nothing wrong with wanting to be loved, right? But if that's the primary thing, it's gonna, at least in my life, cause incredible trouble because I wasn't being authentically myself. And the one thing I'll just add on this to kind of tap it off, I had um stifled all my anger. And so when I first started tapping into that, it was scary and I was not good at it. And I think that's and that sucks. And I think that's one of the things that might be keeping men away from it, doing this work, but it's like that's the path is through it, whatever those emotions are. And to be able to find a group, a place where you can express all those things, whether it's grief, anger, love, you name it, in a way that's um, productive or at least not damaging. I think if I could snap my fingers, right, n- a gift for every man, right, would be those skills to whatever that one emotion is or couple emotions that is derailing them because it comes out sideways. That right that we had a something that they could go through and develop those skills.
Are you a dad who feels like you're juggling a million things at once? Balancing work, family, and personal goals can be overwhelming. But what if there was a solution? That's why we created our new fatherhood community called Dad Mentor. For over 20 years, Dad Central has built practical tools to help dads. We understand the challenges you face and provide the support you need to thrive. The biggest complaint we hear from dads is there's no dedicated support for their specific needs. But not anymore. Our new community, called Dad Mentor, is here to transform your fatherhood experience. Imagine feeling in control, staying calm and patient when your children misbehave. Picture yourself connected to your children, guiding them with confidence and watching them succeed. When you join Dad Mentor, you'll have access to a community of like minded dads committed to their dad journey, just like you. You'll also get the Dad's Roadmap. This is a step by step plan to help you go from unsure to unstoppable as a dad. Monthly masterclasses and Q&A sessions. You'll get answers and know exactly what to do straight from experts. Monthly group meetups that connect dads over common topics. A dad's resource library, curated webinars, podcasts, or guides built by Dad Central to help you grow as a parent. And finally, you'll also get exclusive members only offers and events. Now, many dads do try to do this father thing alone, only to find themselves trapped in frustration and strained relationships. Then they may turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms like drugs, alcohol, or other distractions, leaving their family and their own well being at risk. We don't want you to reach that point of regret. Take steps to invest in you and your family today. Join Dad Mentor and go from stressed, tired, and overwhelmed to confident, calm, and connected. Join us today by going to dadcentral.ca/dads. Ed,
Excellent.
over to you.
Yeah, well, I'm very familiar with the Mankind Project. Actually, one of my mentors when it comes to manhood fathers, a gentleman named Glenn Barker, who used to run
Yeah.
the Mankind Project in Chicago. So he was a gentleman that really got me into the area of amplifying and equipping men and fathers to be better. So I'm very familiar with men's weekends, etc. Very, very familiar with that. I want to transition a little bit in regards to you shared with us that life growing up with your father was not fulfilling. When did you start having a fulfilling life as a father? Because you were getting into a relationship with a lady who already had 2 kids, and you're coming from a background where you weren't having a fulfilling life with your father. Can you share with us any special moments, especially in the early days, being a fulfilled father, coming from the background that you came from?
Um, yes, because there's 2 so for everybody out there who's thinking about to become the stepdad, the age matters, right? And if the kid's under 8, you're probably gonna have a smoother ride. If they're 8, 9, or over, it's gonna be more challenging because they look at the divorce differently. And because I looked into it as soon as I was, "Oh, Katie's got 2 boys." And the the first time I met the boys, right? The youngest, it was great. Katie dated me for a couple months, right? Making sure I've got this person somebody's potential. And so, but I finally met him and it came into the house. The youngest, Colin, came around the corner. And I can remember this like it happened 30 seconds ago. He came around the corner. I was not thinking. I just went, ha! Put my arms up. But I made a startling sound, but I had a smile on my face. He jumped, right? Laughed and ran, and I chased him, and we've been buddies. Since it was just, and that still puts a smile on my face. Right now, Connor, who's older, and at this point too, his dad's with his alcoholism. He's a shouter. They're walking on eggshells. So he's got, lots of reasons to not be excited about a new adult male in his life. So he takes much longer. And I know this going in because of, boys to men, right? And I think whether you're a mentor or a father doesn't matter. Patience, right? Patience is one of our best weapons, or tools, how you ever want to name it. So I know this is going to be a long term thing. And it sure did. But I remember, sort of early on, and this was just a small taste because of what's going on. Um, but we were at Snuffy's. It's this little a hamburger place with malts, and we were at this table. And I don't know if his mom was going to the bathroom or not. I can't remember, or maybe I don't even remember. But I remember him walking me through this video game, right? And he's, 9, 10, in the detail that he was telling me, right? It's like he designed the game, but he did, and it was just, and I'm sitting there across the table, and he's just telling me about, okay, well, then you have this cave and you move in here and you do this. And it was just, you know, there he was. We're having a chat up to talk about video games, and it's something that he was into. And so those are two um early moments when I think of, you know, that are like I those 2 moments meant a lot to me, right? Because when he was telling me that story, that was probably the longest conversation we've had up until that point, right? And so that was beautiful, and we just went he's home from college now, right? And I got to take him to Flame Burger. Yes, I like burgers, right? And it's like, uh, and I got to have here it is 10 years later, and we're sitting at Flame Burger, talking about college and the courses that he's excited about. And it's like, I'm like, damn, you got a good life, Steve. And that absolutely are the challenges in there that have gone along. But I wouldn't trade them, you know, for anything.
Well, thank you for sharing some of that evaluated wisdom and storytelling, because I know we have a number of fathers and cared fathers that are stepdads, or they call now the new term these days bonus dads these days. So I think it's and really bring that perspective of being in a situation you have really two different children generations being a bonus dad. So I think that's really valuable, that insight that you provided. Drew?
Yeah, well said, Ed. And so, Steve, I'm curious to know, over the time, you know, maybe you can give us insight into, I don't know, a few of the things that you have done that have helped bridge the gap and build, which I think what your goal was, a healthier relationship from your in a fathering way with your sons.
Um, well, and they're different with both boys, right? They have different interests. They've got different, personalities. Anybody with kids knows this. And so, um, with Connor, there was he had a tough time in high school, right? With things because of his dad. just the smallest detail. At the end, he wasn't seeing his dad because his dad was drinking himself to death, literally. So it was like he had foregone being a safe father at all to be right. So, and you can only how hard that would be. And so here's I am, um, to open up to somebody else and risk that rejection. I can only, I know for myself, right, as far as women, right, and not being able to share, not that it's the same, but so I could understand his reluctance and patience. So, but I wanted to make sure that he knows that I'm here, right? Even if he's 97% of his conversations at this point are going to be with his mom. There's just no question, and that's it. And I had to get comfortable with that, right? And say, okay, I've got this idea of the father that I want to be, but guess what? He's getting no interest, and it would be terrified if I came in with my new, okay, here I am, take all my wisdom. That would be a disaster. So I had to get comfortable with there's more distance than I want. But how do I reach out, let him know? And so one of the things that I did do at a particular hard time, and we actually talked about this, and I wrote it up, and he's like, that's cool. You can say a little bit more about me if you want on this, because he's like, he owns that. He's at a hard time. He's not talking to me, but I love him, and I know he's having a hard time. So I wrote him a letter. And a lot of times he had that sign on his door, right? And it was for both me and my mom, his mom, right? Stay out, leave me alone. And so I wrote him a letter, put it at his door, right? And in the letter, I'm just saying, I see that you're struggling, and things are hard, and I love you. Kind of the basics of the note. But I just wanted to, know that I see what's going on. I care about him. And he didn't mention the letter. A week later, he wrote a letter to Katie expressing what he was feeling, you know, and I took that as a huge win, right? Because hey, he doesn't. Hey, oh, look, there's a new strategy I could use. Use it to connect with mom. Awesome, right? And I felt like I am taking that as a super win. Because it opened up a new channel of communication between him and his, mom, and that. Um, it's funny. I had a 10-year plan. I thought if he gets to be about 28, 29, and comes back and says, "Dad, I love you," right? That'll be good, right? I'm set. I'm thinking 10 years, right? The youngest, you know, going to the grocery store, love you. It was just never a issue, and it was only about 6 years, right? And when he said, "I love you," as he's going upstairs, our family room's downstairs, and I'm just like, "Oh," and Katie and I looked at each other, and it's just like, "Oh man, that was worth the wait, 6 years and early." It's like that was that was good. So I think and to think this, whether you're stepdad or not, I think, and you can see how this is going to work when you're a parent, right? When you're a dad, sometimes you just have to. Sometimes your job is to wait it out and be there. And that can be hard, especially if you've got that. Take charge. I need to fix things. And my God, if my kid's hurting, I hurt too, right? But then we get into the whole dad role, right? Of man, do you want to fix him, or do you want to make sure he's got the skills to get through and he can handle this, himself? So, um, but that was something that was important, being patient but present. Right? And for activities, I would try stuff, right? Like I tried, we built a flower box, and this was both boys for um, his mom. Not a big hit, But then I grabbed a Bob Ross CD, which I like doing some painting. And with my oldest, he came over. This is before we joined houses, and I had two canvases up, right, all the supplies, and he was over for a couple hours. Painted. He did his painting. I did my painting, right. So nice side by side stuff, right. Dads, we're onto something, right? When people make fun of us for not looking at each other, just tell them to be quiet, right? Because side by side is some of the best, conversation and time together. Um, but we painted, right? We ended up doing 2 paintings, and then he's like, "Okay, that was enough." And the second time, he's like, "I don't really wanna do Bob Ross style, I just wanna do my own thing." I'm like, "Cool. Yeah, absolutely. I don't care. I've got, this is us time doing something." And that first painting is up in his room, so I'm like, and I've built race cars. I love that you have a hockey rink. I've got a friend who does that, right? And I think, oh, unexpected bonus of being a dad that is sort of obvious, but I missed it is I get to, right, like build a race car, right, with a set or help him, or I helped him make a paper mache shark for a class once, the youngest. You know what I mean? This is fun stuff. You get to build an ice skating rink. I mean, how cool is that? Right. And yeah. So um, just one
Wow.
more
So,
perk, right?
yeah, I mean, I think really valuable insight. In particular, the comment you made about, I had to get comfortable with it not being what I wanted. Essentially, I'm trying to paraphrase, meaning that you needed to meet your child or your stepchild where they were at, not force your idea of what being a father and how you wanted to be a father was. And I think that's really powerful and insightful. And you said, because maybe I want to fix it, I want to make it better, or do those things. And so I think that's common. Many dads fall into that trap, with the best of intentions, but it
Mhm.
tends to backfire. Whereas what you're sharing, and the idea of patience but present, and then this whole side by side, I think of the term from John Maxwell, you're finding common ground. That's what essentially you're doing. You're trying to find these commonalities that you could share in whatever way with each of them, which in their own unique personality. So, I mean, a lot of really, really good stuff there. Thank you, Steve. Ed, over to you.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on something that you mentioned. I don't think a lot of fathers would think about doing, and it's something also I learned from one of the gentlemen from the Mankind Project about writing the letter. I think one of the practices I share with a lot of men is there's a gentleman named Robert Leung, who's a great mentor of mine when it comes to manhood, and he has this thing called a living eulogy. And when I first met, I said, Robert, that doesn't make sense. Living eulogy doesn't make sense. But he said, you know what? How come a lot of times a lot of people share the best they have about that other person when they're gone? He says, right, if there's someone that matters in your life, take time, whether it's type or write a letter, pull them aside and read that letter to them and give it to them. And I love how you did that with that young person, that child in your life, that it had to mean the world to them for you to sit down, write a letter, and basically not only the time you spent, but the value of you spending time saying, you know what, you matter so much to me. I'm going to put it down in words and I'm going to give it to you. I think it's very, very powerful, not only for father-children relationship, but just relationships in general. Take the time to write that letter. So I want to bless you with that. That's huge.
Well, thank you.
Really a lot of value there. Drew, back to you.
Okay, can I tell one more
Yeah,
fun
well,
story about something with my oldest?
well, Steve,
Oh, that's okay.
absolutely.
Okay. Oh,
Yes.
so now older, right? My oldest loves musicals, right? And I didn't, or there's only one, Les Mis. I saw it once. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. All the other stuff, I'm like, not me. He does. He plays this stuff, this musical from a musical called Octet in the car, right? And I'm like, hey, I kind of like this. And it was about a support group for people who had a social media addiction. And I'm like, this is good. As an English teacher at the time at a community college, I'm like, this is really good. So I ended up using that musical in my class, right? Because the songs were so good. And it was um yeah, I loved it. It was a blast. It was really good. And it was um an honest, it's an honest way for me to say, man, I get it, son. I see why you like this. And he even directed it when he was in high school as his senior thing. He directed a version of it. And it was so cool to take that thing that he loved and did so well. And it's like going, man, son, you've inspired me. and I use it in my classroom, and my students loved it, and it was just you know so neat, right? As they get when we can take something that they love and truly, not just like real authentic appreciation. And I can't listen to that musical without thinking about him.
Yeah, to me, Steve, you're demonstrating some of those crucial connecting skills, right? Being able to, move from your world into your son's world and meet him there, and then also walk with him as he kind of goes through that. So, really powerful, really great stuff. I think that if dads are listening, that the more that you can do this to identify what your children are interested in, step into their world, find the value, find the good, acknowledge and affirm them in that place and what they are doing, you're only doing your relationship favors. So, really awesome, Steve. So, but I know you're doing a little bit more. You're taking your lived experiences, you're taking your own work that you've done, and you're taking, the working with the boys to men, and as well as you're teaching some of your neuroscience and your coaching background, and you're building something. Can you talk a little bit more about what that is and what type of, I guess, goals you have for the people who are engaging with you through that?
Um, Yeah, so basically I used to teach and do volunteer work, and now I stopped. I quit teaching, and I'm done full time into right. My What I want to do right now is help men become better fathers. Full stop. That's the deal. And I'm doing it in a couple different ways. I'm working on a book right now it's going to be a while yet, but on neuroscience for dads. Taking about what we know about their brains and how we can use that to for all kinds of things, right? I'm really close to being done with a guided journal for dads, right? And so this will be something you can get in. It'll have a set of questions that are just, all set up to get you thinking about, the dad you want to be. What are the things that you need to do, or where, to get a direction of things to change, right? I have the coaching program. So though in a Facebook page, which I call it the Best Dad um, Project, and I always say this after that. It's the best dad in the moment, right? Because if I'm super tired and exhausted, I'm not going to be there to have a great conversation. So maybe the best thing I can do in that moment is say, "Hey, son, I know this is important," or "Hey, daughter, and I'm exhausted. And I hear this, and we're going to talk about it, but I got to get some sleep first," right? Or other. So, it's not that perfect thing. That's about what are the things to do to be the best that you can be in the moment. And so that's the coaching program leg of the uh, kind of what I'm doing. I'm sorry. In the Facebook page, I just have small things, right, where people can check out and get, that typically I think will be helpful or something interesting. And I sub about once every 2 weeks, just to see what our kids are going through, right? And so, sometimes there's some funny sub stories, right? Or some things are just what I've gone or realized about. I mean, spend a day with a bunch of third graders, and not only will you be exhausted, but you will understand why those third graders come home ready to fall apart, right? Because they've spent all day holding it together, and all the, so stuff like that I'll put out on the Facebook page.
Great. Well, um, Steve, one of the things that we want to help dads with is continuing to grow as fathers, and ultimately with this idea of helping break this cycle of fatherlessness that is pervasive in our cultures. And so we want to be able to give them practical insights. And so I've got two questions that I think my goal is to get every guest who's on the show this season to provide an answer to these two questions, so that dads can actually take it away. So, given what we've talked about and we shared, I think it seems like healthy relationships seem to be a theme. Like, what is one question a dad should be asking himself about, this idea of healthy relationship?
I think when it comes to a relationship with our children, am I being the dad I wanted as a kid, or am I being the father my children need?
That's a good question. Wow. Okay. And then next, what's one action that a dad can take based on, moving towards a healthy relationship or moving towards being the dad? I really like what you said, being the dad, the best dad in the moment.
Well, I would say pick one thing and start small. Right, because if you try, there's so much to do that's overwhelming, you're not gonna do anything. Pick one thing. "Oh, okay, I wanna get better at communication." Okay, then what's the smallest thing you can do to set yourself up for success, right, that will move you in that direction? So, one thing and start. My son said this, I thought was awesome. He goes, "You gotta start starting sometime." And I'm like, "Yes, you do, and time to start starting." Right.
Time to start starting. Awesome. Okay. Well, Steve, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show, for being open and vulnerable and sharing parts of your story and giving us a tremendous amount of insight and wisdom, but practical things that dads can take away and begin applying to improve their relationships and show up in the way that they want and be present. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. And I did forget to say, right, if anybody wants, I'm going to add something to. I do have a PDF on journaling, right, that'll help with some emotional stuff and learning from parenting. So if anybody wants to just send me an email, right, Steve at steveanderson.coach, I'll send them that PDF for free. And I just did write that letter about letter writing. Right. So you put Dad Central in it, and I'll send you a copy right in the email of that letter so you can see the steps that I put down about how I did that.
So you want them to put the email subject, Dad Central?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or I love
Perfect.
Canada, whatever, something that
No, I love Canada winters. No, I love
yes,
Minnesota winters. No, that's whatever. Just put winter, right? Well, look,
yes.
Steve, I want to say thank you for taking the time out of your positive, productive schedule, being a father, being caring about men and those who love them, and just having a good heart and doing the right thing for the right reasons when it comes to dad and families. I just want to bless you with that. And if there's anything we can do to help you uplift this journey of fatherhood and manhood, please feel free to reach out. So we appreciate you and bless you.
Uh, Thank you both. This has been a lot of fun, and it was been a great conversation.
Thank you so much. We'll be in touch. Have a great day. All right.
What are
Wrap
your
up time.
takeaways, Ed?
Oh, you're going to hit me first? I
Yeah.
still think, and it's never been mentioned on this program, but writing the letter. Writing the letter, as I said, Robert Leung taught me that many, many years ago, and I still consider him as a mentor. And another thing that he did for many years ago, he lives in the United States. One year, they all got together for big family dinner, and they sat down, and he introduced something called the family conversation. And each person would share what they cared about and what they were concerned about for each one of the people around the table. And the first person who spoke was a niece of his that was 4 years old. And she said to her father, "Daddy, you don't spend enough time with me."
Hmm.
So writing that letter and the patience, and also letting your child live their life with some guide rails, obviously, but just be a guide, let them live it. I think many powerful messages that Steve shared, but the writing the letter, I do that with a lot of men and a lot of fathers that I'm very close to. I write them that letter because the self-esteem and self-value, a lot of times dads are just doing a lot of stuff and they don't feel any value. They don't feel like they're valued, and it's far from the cause. We value fathers here, and we are all about valuing and amplifying and celebrating fatherhood. So long-winded, but you got a few things there.
Yeah. Well said. I think on that, I guess, same path, what I take away is, when you are willing to do the work, willing to stay committed and keep going down the path, I think Steve's an example of, the type of result you can begin to see. You can, especially when you think about the idea of breaking a cycle. Steve is doing that, but it didn't happen overnight, and it hasn't been without, I'm sure, um, a lot of hard work, or as you like to say, heart work.
Yeah.
And so to me,
Yeah.
I think that's what really stands out in hearing Steve, as well as the, I think, real wisdom he did share. So yeah, that's what stands out to me for sure.
Yeah. We all want to make that hard work of fatherhood become hard work. And I believe, and I feel that Steve is a living example, and not the only one in the world of fatherhood, but the hard work, transform it into heart work. So just to end up as always, the Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, there is a positive impact. As always, we would love you to email us comments, guest suggestions, feedback. Absolutely. We want to hear it all. Also, too, if you want to listen or watch 2 seasons, now going to the 3rd season of Dad Central shows, go to podcast.ca/ dadcentral.ca/podcast. And also, especially leave us reviews, especially if you're listening to replays on the Apple platform. And finally, website address dadcentral.ca, where we have piles of free resources for dads, fathers, male caregivers, and those who love them. So as always, don't just manage your time, manage your energy. Remember to give yourself grace. God bless, and we'll see you soon. Take care.